I, Suparna Kamath, have great pleasure in welcoming you all to the 33rd webinar under the Member Enrichment Program or MEP of the Learning Garden Initiative. This is a fairly recent part of the Science Awareness Committee of IFSA. I now call upon Dr. Surekha Zingde, Trustee and immediate past President of IFSA, to tell you more about it. Dr. Zingde was formerly Deputy Director of ATTRACT and is at present on several boards. Madam, please.
Thank you, Suparna. Good evening, friends. I know that we have participants who are here who are probably not familiar with IFSA and our activities. So, in brief, I will tell you a little bit about it. IFSA is an NGO with following mandates: community welfare, science awareness, and women empowerment. I request you to please visit our website, which gives you all the information, and I'm sure you'll be very excited to see what we all do. A very important component of science awareness, which Suparna just mentioned, is the Learning Garden. This conducts a member enrichment program, which I look on it more as a member empowerment program. This program has emerged from the Learning Garden initiative of IFSA. The Learning Garden by itself was started in 2018 with the mandate to develop an interesting space on the IFSA campus, which would be a live open laboratory of flora and fauna. It has turned out to be more than that. It has truly become a member enrichment program and a member empowerment program. Members of LG, several of whom did not know much about flora and fauna, which includes me too, initially met to share information in informal discussions among friends over interesting luncheon sessions, which included forgotten food items we generally do not use. These meetings slowly developed into presentations using PowerPoints for the group. The ensuing increase in knowledge base enriched the members, and the presentations empowered them. The confidence that developed is now apparent in the presentations made online, not only for their group of friends, but to all those interested in the topic, such as our friends who are present here today. The enthusiastic response gauged by the question and answers that follow each presentation has been another confidence building factor. Today, our empowered members themselves, when they look back, would have never imagined that they can do it. I congratulate each and every one in this group who have collectively shown the way forward towards empowerment. They are now moving one step forward to present their knowledge and their own accomplishments in an upcoming science festival for online teaching and sharing their knowledge in an internship program for college students. All this shows that age is no bar and learning is a lifelong experience. And we can achieve what we have so far not attempted to do, but only dreamed of. This is one of IFSA's programs of empowering women. There are others too. The MEP program and our other programs together, I would admit, are in parallel to the nation's efforts to bring to fore women in all walks of life. Recent examples in India include the first woman pilot, Lieutenant Colonel Swati Rathore, who led the 5 blast at the Republic Day parade this year. The other one being the 4-member women cockpit crew led by Captain Zoya Agarwal, an Air India pilot who flew over the North Pole from San Francisco to Bengaluru, a full 16,000 kilometers at one stretch, considered as one of the longest stretches to fly non-stop. The MEP activity has identified several of our elder and younger members with hidden talents. Today, we have Sweedil Shivkar, who is an excellent compare, and she will enrich us with the hidden secrets of the orchids. Did you know that certain species of orchids can survive up to 100 years? Or that orchids have the largest variety of flowers with a number of officially documented species standing at an amazing 25,000 plus? I leave the floor to Srili to enlighten us on all these wonderful characteristics of the beautiful and unique orchids. Thank you, Suparna, for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you for those wonderful words, ma'am. Before we go ahead and listen to our eloquent speaker, I would like to share with you some of our accomplishments thus far. So, Sweden completed her master's and PhD in botany. Her thesis title was Taxonomy and Ecology of Orchidaceae family of Mumbai, Palghar, and Thane districts. She explored various remote corners of the study area to gain insight into the orchid kingdom. She worked as a senior research fellow on digitized inventory of medicinal plant resources of Maharashtra. This project focused on ethnobotanical aspects of medicinal plants of Maharashtra. The inventorization of floral components of Karnala and Tansa wildlife sanctuaries was conducted and prepared for the Forest Department as a taxonomist on board. All these field work led to several scientific research papers in botany, especially in taxonomy. The review of Orchidaceae family of Sanjay Gandhi National Park and the wallflora of Vasai Fort are a couple of them. Sweden has been a resource person for Bombay Natural History Society for the on-field as well as online botany course. She has also penned several popular articles related to botany in various publications. The love for greens prompted her to volunteer for Green Souls organization, which specializes in urban farming. She also is an amateur bird watcher and loves to observe and capture images of the wonders of nature. After hearing her talk today, I'm sure you will appreciate that she has much more to add to this. So let's not, much, without much further ado, let's go on to listen to her. Sweden, you may begin.
So, thank you, Suparna ma'am. Thank you, Surekha ma'am. Okay. So, today I want to speak about orchids. It's a wonderful world of orchids. Orchids have been, common man's dream. Charles Darwin's, laboratory was full of orchids. He studied orchids, and they are a mesmerizing group of plants. They have been, they have sent a magical spell on all the human beings after 19th century. And let me tell you today that, what we see, those are cultivated orchids, but they have a wild side and also a dark side. So I want to share you their wild side and some of their dark side too. So first we look at how the word orchid came into existence. Orchids were first known as orchis. They are still known as orchis in Greek. There is a species called as orchis. Okay? It's a genus. That is how the word orchid came into existence. And orchis in Greek, it means testicles. I'll show you why it is called as testicles, because the tubers, the underground part of an orchid looks like a testicle. And that's why orchis. And when Linnaeus, the father of botany, of taxonomy, he wanted to rename them as orchids, and that's why family Orchidaceae. Now, what happened during the Victorian era in the 1830s, when the first orchid was seen by the aristocrats, by the kings, by the queens, they were so enchanted and they were under the spell that they wanted orchids for their gardens, for their living rooms. And so they sent out orchid hunters to find out orchids for them which were unique and which no one would have, only they would have such a species. And that's how orchid fever, like just like tulip mania, there was orchid fever, and that, which gave existence or which gave birth to the word orchidilarium. And now the world is enchanted with the word orchids, with the world of orchids, and the orchidophilia is still going on. It is the second largest flowering plant family. The first is the sunflower family. They have some 28,000 to 30,000 of species all around the world. Why I say 28 to 30? Because the whole family is being revised. There's a flux. Some names are being put under as synonyms. Some names are being rejected. That's why there's a wide range, 28,000 to 30,000. They have magnificent shapes, colors. They have, if you see the fragrance, they have something like pleasant also and a putrid also. Now, which depends on how they do the pollination, which I'll come to it later. But if you see in this slide, there are different shapes. So you see the shape. It is, it's like a fan. Some have fine bristles. Some have a bright red color. Some have a brown color. So there is a wide range of shapes, colors, and fragrance in orchids. And uh, you won't be surprised that this diversity is 10% of all the seed plants that exist on the planet Earth. Now we come to their distribution on the globe. So if you see South America and Southeast Asia, they are very rich in orchids. Okay, these are one of the very good orchid hotspots in the world. So if you see Colombia, it has the highest, which is 4,270, and Indonesia, it has 4,000 species. Now, why this? Because the tropical climate is very conducive for the orchids. They favor this climate. And that's why Indonesia and South America are very rich in orchids. And you'll see more density and also endemism. Endemism is something where you will find those species are restricted to a particular habitat. Okay? You won't find its species outside that habitat or outside that region. India, if you see, we have 1,256 species of orchids. If you see islands like Madagascar, they do not have a high number of species, but the species richness, the endemicity of orchids is very rich in islands like Madagascar and even in New Guinea and New Caledonia. In India, the orchid hotspots in India are the Himalayan region, which is the western and the eastern Himalayas, and the northeastern region, the Western Ghats, Eastern Ghats, and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So if you see northwestern Himalayas, they have 200 plus species, but the eastern region is the most richest, the northeastern and the eastern Himalayas, which have 800 species more. History of Orchidaceae. If you look at the evolution or the origin of this family, the evidence is 110 million years, but according to me, they existed before that age, like 200, maybe 200 to 250 million years ago, because they existed on the land which was called as Gondwana land. And when the Gondwana land started drifting, the species, they were separated and they existed on the different countries like Australia, Africa, India, Madagascar, and America. And that is how it was too. But now recently they have found an amber, a bee in an amber, which has a pollen grain of an orchid, which is 55 million years old. So at least we know that they are 55 million years old, but they existed before that. Now, first written record was by Confucius, okay, a philosopher, and he wrote poems on orchids. He had orchids in his room and he was very much inspired with orchids. Whenever he would feel down, he would look at the orchids and would start penning down poems and verses. Carolus Linnaeus, okay, the father of botany, he gave the name orchid. From orchids, he came to orchid and family Orchidaceae, and he described various species of orchids. After Carolus Linnaeus, it was John Lindley who described more than 6,000 species of orchids, which was a voluminous work. And he has been called as the Victorian father of orchidology. After that, Charles Darwin, even he couldn't run away from orchids, because his one whole book, his theory on evolution, or the Darwin's theory, is also, it has come from orchids. Okay, and it is Fertilization of Orchids, the book he has written. And after that, it was Joseph Dalton Hooker. He was the director of Botanical Gardens of Kew. And he came to India, he wrote the Flora of British India, and he described 1600 species of orchids from the erstwhile India. And after that, the recent one, Father H. Santapau, he was a Jesuit priest. He was also a director of the Botanical Survey of India, and he wrote Orchids of Bombay along with his student, Dr. Zarir Kapadia. And till today, Orchids of Bombay is a very good reference book for people who study orchids of the Northwestern Ghats. Then the vegetative parts. So after we see the history and geography, we come to the science of orchids. Now here, if in the first image you see, these are the tubers, the underground stems of orchids, and they look like the testicles, and that's why the family came into existence. Now after this, we also have something called as pseudobulbs. So in this, the down right image, and also in the middle image, if you see these thick structures, they are called as pseudobulbs. So something like the stem of an orchid has been modified into a pseudobulb, which will help the orchid to survive in the unfavorable conditions. So when there's a dry season, when there is drought, the plant will shed its leaves. The water which is stored and the nutritive tissue which is inside the pseudobulb, that will help the orchid to survive and to tide over the unfavorable times. And the leaf of the orchids, which you see here in the left hand side image, the leaves can be thick because some orchids, they survive in very dry conditions, so they have thick leaves, and some which survive, which have a very short lifespan, they have very thin papery like leaves. So there is a variation in the leaves of an orchid. The floral parts. This is the most interesting part of the orchid plant, the floral part. Okay. If you look at the flower of an orchid, orchid belongs to the group of monocotyledons, like the grasses. So in monocotyledons, if you see, there are they do not have petals and sepals, but they have something called as tepals. So there are same like lilies. This also has 6 floral parts. Okay, the flower, the petal, and the corolla, the sepals. But if you ask me, then why is it not mentioned that tepal? It's mentioned tepal here, but if you ask me, in this diagram, which is here in the right corner, there is sepals and petals. Because they have different structures, they are not called as tepals, they are called as sepals and petals. So the outer 3 parts, the floral parts, that is a sepal, and the inner 3, they are the petals. And the third petal, it has been modified and it looks very attractive. It is made attractive for the pollinators. So that is called as a lip or the labellum. And orchids, they favor cross-pollination. They do not like self-pollination. So what they have done is, between the male and the female parts, they have put a curtain, okay, that is called as a rostrum. So the stamen of the flower does not fall on the stigma of the same flower, but it is carried to the other flower, which will aid in cross-pollination. And they have also something called as a spur. Spur is an extension of the lip, the labellum. So spur, it stores the nutritive, very sugary fluid, the nectar, so which is to attract the pollinators. The fruits and the seeds. So after the flower, it develops into a fruit. The fruits are capsules. It is called as a capsule, same like bindi or the okra, the lady's finger. The fruits of orchids, they split at angles. Like you see here, they split into 3 parts. Okay, and these are the seeds. The picture here in the middle, these are the seeds. And orchids are known to have millions of seeds in one fruit pod. But the viability is very less. The germination rate is only 0.3%. Why that? Because since the seeds are smaller in the course of evolution, what the orchid has done is, it has packed a lot of seeds inside the fruit, and there is no nutritive tissue. So the seed has to depend on the fungal component, on a fungus, to provide a nutrition to it, okay, and then it develops into a plant. So All the orchids in the initial stages are partially, they are dependent. They are sort of parasitic, we can say. They need a fungal component to survive. And here in this diagram, left hand side corner, if you see, the orchid has the smallest seed, because here there's a mustard, there's a salt grain for comparison, and also the poppy seed. Okay? So if you compare, orchid has the smallest seed. The size is the smallest. The fungal association. So orchids fully or partially depend on the fungus. So some orchids, they just need fungus for the initial stages of their life, and some orchids, they totally depend on the fungus till the end of their life. So it is a sort of a association. Okay, the orchid fungal mycorrhiza is the component is called as, and the fungus will decide which orchid will grow in a particular area, because there is a compatibility between the orchid and the fungus. So here I have shown the total orchid life cycle. The seeds, they get infected with the mycorrhizal fungus. They develop into a small protocom like structures, a seedling, and then the adult plant. Now we come to the habit and the habitat. They grow in various habitats. Just like I said, they favor tropical climate, but you also find orchids in semi-arid areas, in the meadows, in the alpine meadows. So they grow from sea level to 5,000 meters. And what is that they favor? They have two types of habits. They have terrestrial, that is the ones which grow on the ground, and they also have a arboreal habit. Okay, where they grow on trees. They grow on trees, but they're not parasitic on the trees. The orchids depend on the fungus, but not on the plant which it grows, and that's why they are not parasites. Okay, they are not parasitic in habitat. They don't take the nutritive tissue from the host plant, and that's why the plant on which they grow, they are called as phorophytes and not host plants. So here you will see some of the photographs of orchids. The first is a Habenaria, which is a ground orchid. Even the second one, Cypripedium, is a ground orchid. But the third one here is an epiphyte, which is growing on a tree, okay, and it is surrounded with the moss. Okay. And the last one here is a different type. I'll describe about it in the next slide. So in ground orchids, you have two types. You have herbs and you have microheterotrophs. In herbs, you will also find them which grow on the ground, and the ones, they are like small herbs, and the others which grow as climbers or vines, like the vanilla orchid, which is shown here in the first image. The second one is a microheterotroph. A microheterotroph is something which depends on the fungal component, so it will not have any leaves, just the tuber, and the flowering and the fruiting will come above the ground just to showcase the flowers, to attract the pollinators. It will develop into a seed, and again the cycle continues. It will depend on the fungus for the whole of its life. And the third image is very interesting, because this is an underground orchid which is found in Australia. So what these orchids do is they spend their whole life underground. Even the pollination happens underground with the help of the underground pollinators. But when it has to disperse its seeds, the whole stalk will elongate and it will expose itself above the ground, and it will disperse the seeds. Next are the arboreal orchids, the epiphytes they are called as. So here in the first image, you will see there's a tree which is covered. There are some pink blotches here. You see these are all orchids. These are growing on a tree. And the second image is of the orchid which is growing on the rocks. So they are called as lithophytes. The ones which grow on trees, they are called as epiphytes. And 70% of the global species of orchids, they are epiphytes. Only 30% are ground orchids. The illustration which I am showing here, I just wanted to explain, how these epiphytes, they favor different parts of a tree. They grow on different parts of the tree. So every species has its own microhabitat on the tree. They have two types of roots, clinging roots and breathing roots. So clinging roots will catch hold of the tree, and breathing roots will help in respiration. Since they are not parasites, they will take moisture, oxygen from the air. Okay, and that is how they also have their own leaves. So they will produce their own, with the help of photosynthesis, their own nutrition. So in this illustration, you will find some orchids will grow only in the fourth part of this plant. Some will grow in the fifth and some in the sixth. So this is how the orchids, the epiphytes or epiphytic orchids are studied in a rainforest. This is a very helpful diagram when we study them. Now, world and India. So world, we came to know that there are 28 to 30,000, but India has 1,256. And Arunachal Pradesh is the richest. It has 612 species. After that, it's Sikkim and Darjeeling Himalaya, which have 564 species. Maharashtra has, this I'm talking only about the wild orchids, not the cultivated ones. If you talk about hybrids, the cultivated ones, there are more than 1,20,000 species. So the wild ones are only 1/3 of the cultivated, because people or everybody is more attracted and interested in the cultivated ones. But I think that should be the case, because nobody should touch the wild orchids and they should be safe in their habitats. Some interesting orchids. The first one is the Indian bee orchid, because there are also bee orchids found in Europe. So this is the Indian bee orchid. Now, why I have made this slide? Because I call them beauty with brains, because they have put in a lot of effort to survive, to evolve, and to flourish, and to come to this stage on planet Earth. And they have taken they have devised a lot of methods to survive on this planet. And if you see the first one, the monkey orchid, this is doing rounds on WhatsApp. The monkey orchid, it is from the genus Dracula, okay, and they are called as monkey orchids. Then there are lady sleepers orchid, which are very famous, and also this is a doll orchid. So the bee orchid and the doll orchid, these are found here in Maharashtra, and the other ones, they are the lady sleeper orchid. There are some species that are found in India, but the monkey orchid is found in South America. Some bizarre shapes. So after the interesting orchids, you can see there's a duck orchid, there's a ghost orchid, there's a Kathakali Pushpa orchid, and also a bumblebee orchid. Now all these, the different shapes that the orchid has developed in all these years, in all these eons, is for pollination. The only aim is to pollinate and to reproduce and to survive as a species. So as I said, they favor cross-pollination, and the pollinators can be bees, wasps, butterflies, moths, birds, the birds like hummingbirds, the smaller birds, and also flies like carrion flies and different types of flies that are attracted towards orchids. And what they do is, not every time they will give a reward. They lure the pollinators. The pollinator thinks that there is a reward for them, but sometimes there is no reward. The orchid will only, it becomes mean, okay, it only does its work, but in that process it fools the pollinator. So Suparna ma'am, can you please I want you all to see a video. After seeing the video, I will share my experience of sorry.
There's any reward of any kind. In the warmer parts of Europe lives a whole group that bamboozle their pollinators into thinking that they're going to get a really sensational reward, a sexual one. They're little orchids, and their flowers reproduce remarkably closely the signals that enable a male bee or wasp to recognize a female of the same species. Several have blue patches. One is fringed with what looks like fur. A wasp's wings in the right light do flash iridescent blue, and its abdomen is covered with thick brown fur. A female wasp also pumps out an identifying perfume, but the orchid does the same, and the result is irresistible. As the male wasp nuzzles forward in his attempts to mate, he butts the pollinia which stick to him like yellow horns. He seems to be well aware that something has happened to him, but there's nothing he can do about it, and he flies off to try his luck elsewhere. Which, of course, is what the orchid requires, because this time he deposits the pollen on another bogus female. The hairs on many of these orchids run downwards, as though the female is sitting with her head up. But some reproduce her clinging head down, and then the male must land that way if he wants to mate, and he will get the pollen stuck to his rear. This one too seems fully aware that he's got rather more than he bargained for. The orchid's mimicry is so convincing and enticing that sometimes a flower will attract a whole scrum of sex-crazed suitors. Some are trying to get to the orchid and will inadvertently deliver the pollen. Other males, since there seems to be a full house, attempt to mate with one another.
Yeah, so this was a wonderful video clip on pollination in orchids. This is not the case always. In this case, yes, the orchid has fooled its pollinator. Yeah, but this is how generally pollination takes place in orchids. Like here in this slide, you will see a fly. It has got these pollinia. Pollinia are the pollen grains. Okay, the male part which has to be deposited on the female part. And what the orchid has done in the process of evolution is they have made packets of pollen grains. So the pollen grains are not tiny grains, but they are packets of grains. So when the pollinator is carrying it to the stigma or the female part of the flower, the whole packet is transferred. Since the stigma has millions of ovules inside it, it will need millions of pollen grains to fertilize it. So that's why the orchid develops pollinia. The pollen grains are bundled up into a pollinia. An interesting orchid called as Darwin's orchid. Okay. Now the story goes that when Darwin was studying orchids, he received a sample in 1862. And when he saw the orchid, when he looked at the flower, he said that if this orchid has such a long spur, see this is a spur, I said, and there's a nectar here at the tip of it. So he postulated that there must be some pollinator which has a proboscis as long as a spur of this orchid, but he in his lifetime he couldn't see it. Okay, he never came across any pollinator, but after 40 years a moth was discovered which was known as Xanthopan morgani predicta, and they found that the proboscis of this moth is long as the spur of this orchid, and this is the pollinator of this orchid. It was called as Darwin's orchid. Okay. It is also called as comet orchid or Darwin's star orchid, also called as Star of Bethlehem. Okay, this is found in Madagascar. So this is a very it's a very wonderful story of coevolution. Coevolution is where the pollinator and the plant, they are any two organisms, they evolve together in the course of evolution. Orchid, this is found in Maharashtra. It is called as the Sheput habeambri or the Habenaria longiconiculata. You will see even the spur of this one is as long, it's very long, and even there's a moth which pollinates this orchid, and it has been observed by some of the researchers, orchid researchers. They have recorded some of the moth species which pollinate this orchid. This is one more interesting orchid, right-hand side, that is the ghost orchid. Ghost orchid, why? Because you will not see any leaves on it. This the pedicel of this flower. So only you will see the come to form. And when vanilla is tropical country now are trying to gain market share for vanilla. Only in Mexico. It is found in India. Exists hand pollinate each and every flower to get a pod. Because unless and until you pollinate, you won't get the fruit. Is dried, it is 9 months to get a fully ripe or a ready vanilla pod which can be used for any preparations. So the first are the seeds flavor, and here in the left hand side corner, these are the pods, these are the unripe pods, and they take a long time to ripe. After all these cultivated orchids, wild orchids which are seen in and around Mumbai region. Okay, the first one is the Akambe. Just take a note that in the left hand side, the scale which I have shown, this is January to December. So it's January, February, March till December. The first column is the orchids will have leaves all around the year. That is, also the leaf column. In case of Akambe, it is called as tiger orchid because as the flower shows, there are stripes like that. It grows on trees. It grows. It is found in urban in Vasai region, it is called as bangur because people feel that it's a parasite and they hack down the branches, especially the mango trees, all the economical species which are present. They will just hack down the branches and they just get rid of these orchids. But they don't know that they are orchids. They are actually they feel they are parasites, but these are actually orchids. So this is one of the commonest orchids in the urban area. You will find them in RA, in Goregaon, even near Mahalakshmi Race Course, and in Sanjay Gandhi National Park. The second one is the Mayur Pushpa or the Aridis. It's also called as a foxbrush orchid. Again, an epiphyte. It is found on other trees. It is found in the deciduous forest. And I have observed swift butterflies feeding on the nectar of these plants. Probably they could be the pollinators of this orchid. And the orchid butterfly larvae feed on the buds of this. It is commonly seen in Sanjay Gandhi National Park and Tungareshwar Wildlife Sanctuary. The flowering season is between between May to June. May and June, just before the rainy season, they start flowering. The Indian bee orchid, it is called as Brahmari because it looks like a bee is humming. Since the flowers, only the flowers are visible and the peduncle is very fragile and very delicate. So whenever with a slight sway of breeze, only the flower starts swaying and so that is called the Indian orchid. Then we have the Sitechi Veni, or the foxtail orchid. This is common in the South Konkan area, and you'll see many women, girls, they just adorn, like a gajra, they will wear it, and that's why it is called as Sitechi Veni. Even in Assam, and especially in Assam, during the Bihu festival, they the women, they and the girls, they wear this as a garland in their hair. It's like a headgear trees, and it is best seen at the wildlife sanctuary. Then we have this ground orchid, Novelia aragona. It is called as the Tantu Parna. Tantu Parna, that means, it has very fine nerves. Okay, and the very peculiar thing about this orchid is with the first showers, the flowering stalk will start developing. Okay, not the leaf. First, the flowering stalk develops, then it is pollinated, fertilized, the fruit develops, and after this is over, then you will see the small, the pink structure with the green. This is the leaf. So first the flowering happens, and then the leaf. Then the leaf will remain till September. Once the monsoon is over, the flowering stalk and the leaf stalk, everything disappears, and only the tuber remains under the ground. This is seen along the forest paths in Sanjay Gandhi National Park. Then we have the Habenaria grandifloriformis. It is called as Ekpatri Habe Amri. Amri is a common word for orchids. Then we have Habe Amri, Dande Amri, different names for that. And the name itself tells you it's a one-leafed. Okay, the leaf, it is very much attached to the ground, very parallel to the ground, and it comes from a genus Habenaria, which is the largest terrestrial genus in India. Okay. These also have spurs where they store nectar for their pollinators. Then you have the Dendrobium. This is the largest genus in India. It has more than 116 species, I suppose. So it is the largest genus of epiphytic orchid in India. The flowers, they are very buffish white, but they have a very good aroma, or very good fragrance actually. And it is a very citrusy smell, which is to attract the pollinators. Then we have, this is Pectilis gigantea. It is the largest flowering wild orchid in the Western Ghats. It is called as a butterfly orchid or Khandarachi Rani, and it grows up to 3 feet. The whole plant grows up to 3 feet high, and the flowering is a little late. Most of these terrestrial orchids in and around Mumbai region, you will see them flowering in the monsoon between June to September. But Pectilis, it starts flowering in late September and October. So done with the wild orchids. These are the cultivated orchids, which most of us are familiar with. The first one is the Cymbidium. Okay. Then we have the Phalaenopsis, which is called as moth orchid. Then the dancing lady orchid, the Oncidium, and this is the Dendrobium. So these are one of the commonest and very popular cultivated orchids in India as well as in the world. Now some similar looking flowers which look like orchids, but they are not orchids, like the balsams. Some of the balsams here down in the right hand side corner, the impatiens, they look like orchids, but they are not from the orchid family. Even the kanchan here, it is called as the orchid tree, but it is not an orchid. It belongs to a different family. Even some of the violaceae members and the lilies, they look like orchids, but they are not from the orchid family. Some trivia. Orchids, they have a lot of significance and importance in many countries like Colombia, Singapore, Indonesia, Costa Rica. They are national symbols, national flowers. They are orchids. Especially Colombia, it's Cattleya trianae, which is the first image down here. The second one, is the third one here is Dendrobium nobile. The second one is a Singapore. It's a national flower of Singapore. Even Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, they have a common state symbol, that is Rinco stylus. Meghalaya, especially all the northeastern states, their state symbols are orchids. The smallest and the largest orchid. So the smallest orchid, if you can see here, the comparison is with the tip of a pencil. It was discovered in 1912. It is Platysteles jungermanoides. But now there are reports that there is another orchid which has been discovered, say 3 years ago, and they are still describing it. It is smaller than this orchid. They say that it belongs to the same genus. Okay? And the largest is below this platycil, this grammatophyllum. It is called as sugarcane orchid or even tiger orchid or a cane orchid. This grows up to 10 feet tall and it can weigh up to 2 tons. So this is found in Indonesia. It is wild in Indonesia, but some of the botanical gardens like Kew, they have them these in their conservatories. Okay? And the largest flower, if you just take the measurement, the petal, it from end to end, it's 3 feet long, which you see the Paphiopedilum sanderianum, which is a lady sleeper orchid. And the one here, the Oberonia, the first one, this is one of the smallest flowers which we find in India. This Oberonia genus, they all have very small flowers. So this is the small, I would say, according to my experience, this could be the smallest flower of an orchid in India. In 1850s, the first hybrid was developed, Calanthe domini, and after that, different hybrids and cultivars and everything came into existence. So that was the starting point where the hybrids were developed. Before that, only the wild orchids were collected from the forest, especially the Amazon forest and the Indonesian forest. And if you see the blooms may last for few hours to 9 months, like in Dendrobium that I've mentioned here, Dendrobium cuthbertsi. The unusual names. Now, some orchids, they have very unusual names like only like capital A and a small a. That is a generic name. So these are all generic names. Like in all the organisms have Latin names, scientific names, which are a generic name and a specific name. So you have mentioned all these are the generic names of orchids which are very unusual, like Dracula, India, Zeuxine, Brigdaxenia. Some of these are very difficult to pronounce. And they are also medicinal, like I have mentioned here. They are used in Chyawanprash. There is Riddhi, there is Jivanti, there is Vanada. So there are different orchids which are also medicinal. And the salep, which is very famous, okay, the drink which is made out of orchid, the dried orchid tubers, it is especially famous in the Middle Eastern region. Places one can visit. So in India, the Eastern Himalayas like the Sikkim and Arunachal Pradesh, they are very good. Then Western Himalayas, Uttarakhand is really good. Northeastern states, Assam, Meghalaya. In Western Ghats, it's the Maharashtra, and especially Karnataka and Kerala are very good. And in Eastern Ghats, yes, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana is very good. Some of the suggested reading. So if you want to read more about orchids, there are some very good field guides. There are reference books. These are some of them. Especially the Fertilization of Orchids by Charles Darwin is very interesting. The language is little difficult, but it is very interesting if you want to read about the evolution theory that was mentioned by Charles Darwin. And this is my paper on orchids of Sanjay Gandhi National Park. This was published along with my guide, Dr. Rajendra Shinde. And when I was doing my PhD, we did this account for Sanjay Gandhi National Park because nobody had done this in quite a few years after Father Santapao. So this was a very good report for Sanjay Gandhi National Park. And these are some of the reference guides: Orchids of India, Orchids of Eastern Ghats, and Orchids of Maharashtra. And this is a very good field guide, the Wild Orchids of Northwestern Ghats, if you want to explore wild orchids in especially the Maharashtra, Goa, and the Belgaum region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sweedle. That